Doctors, if you want to build significant cash flow and financial freedom outside of medicine while paying less in taxes, then you don't want to miss the in-person Physician Freedom Summit this October, where 5-minute conversations could lead you to your next mentor, partner, or increase your net worth by millions. I'm Parambala Dandapani. I'm a radiologist, a mom, a real estate investor, and founder of GW Capital and Generational Wealth MD, a growing community of over 20,000 physicians whom I have helped acquire over $300 million worth of real estate. But just like you, for over a decade, I was trudging along the traditional W-2 path, overworked, struggling to balance work and life. Looking back, many of these speakers shaped my journey, and at the Physician Freedom Summit, you will be in the room having face-to-face conversations with these short-term rental gurus who've replaced their clinical earnings through their real estate while slashing their tax bill by hundreds of thousands of dollars, creative financing and alternative investment experts who became financially free in their 30s and 40s and together manage over $1 billion in assets. And you will get insider access to the wealth building strategies that they're pivoting to in this market cycle, while others sit on the sidelines missing out on this once in a lifetime opportunity to build generational wealth. I'm super excited about seeing all of you in person in beautiful California. I know this is going to change your life. I will see you there. Don't forget to sign up at generationalwealthmd.com/summit. Okay, so this episode is more mindset than strategy. I know we do a lot of episodes on strategy, but for investors, the biggest thing that you really need to focus on that is going to give you the massive boost, non-linear growth, is mindset. And so I'm super excited to talk about today's topic. And this is for anyone who's been struggling with replacing your clinical income through investments, slashing your tax bill, and you keep listening to stories of other doctors who are doing exactly that. And you really want financial security, but when you're trying to do it, you just never seem to be able to find the time, or you're feeling overwhelmed about making those shifts, or you're losing steam and almost seems like, you have to work till you're 65 and there really isn't another option for you. And I hear this all the time. It is not you. When you hear these stories of physicians that we talk about in our community and you listen to elsewhere, they are using a 10x strategy, which is them leveraging 3 key elements, and they're not doing a 2x strategy, which is hustling, right? And this is why when I talk about Dr. Kumar, one of the coaches within our coaching program, she has cash flow from her short-term rentals that exceeds her clinical income, right? And she spends less than 2 hours a week on her portfolio. So look at the ROI over there. Dr. Samana Mool, Dr. Shweta and Kishore, they in 1 year were able to shelter over $800,000 of clinical income from taxes, right? Dr. Ravo went from 0 real estate investments to, within a 2-year period, partnering with others to manage over 29 million in assets. And so these stories are still 10x stories, right? And they have, to 10x, you need to have a special 3-pronged approach. And it is not your typical 2x, like I'm going to double what I'm doing, because 2xing is hustle. That's what we've all been trained to do. It takes time. It is soul crushing. And it means doing more, and 10x is about doing less. And so when I first heard the concept, it blew my mind. But if you look back, I've done this multiple times in my life. I'm sure many of you have done this many times over, right? And so we're now just going to talk about how you can use this for your investments, right? And how these physicians are using the 10x strategy and doing less. What are the 3 key elements that is required for you to make these non-linear 10x jumps? And I'm going to give you one easy decision that you can make today that can help you make a quantum leap.
Welcome to Generational Wealth MD's podcast on financial freedom through investing in real estate. My name is Parambala Dandapani. I'm a mom, radiologist, real estate investor, and mentor to others looking to start or scale their real estate portfolios. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with inspiration, strategies, and insight so that you can stop trading your time for money and live life on your terms. If you love the episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.
Okay, let's get started. So many of you know my story. I talk about it from the perspective of, okay, I've been where you are, I've done what you're doing, and this is how I was able to transition, right? And I did it, I had mentors and I did it in my journey. And like I said, many of us at many points, right? We've had 10x transformations many times over. So a few years ago, I was a burnt out physician who was trading my time for money. And then within a year, I got to six figures in passive income, right? That was a 10x jump for me. When we built out the Generational Wealth MD community, I think we started out with 200 people in a WhatsApp group. I think it was less than 200. And now we're at 20,000 members in the community. That is, it's not, it's more than a 10x jump, right? But that is a huge nonlinear shift. I started off a few years ago with a portfolio of a few $1,000,000. And today, GW Capital, we've partnered to manage assets over $375 million. That is a 10x jump, not linear, right? But as we look at those non-linear 10x jumps, what I want to break first before we get into how is the myth that 10x is harder than 2x, right? Because when you think about it, you say, well, 2x is hard enough. How hard is 10x going to be? And that's a myth. And so, when you're 2xing, you are doubling your effort. And I saw the book 10x is easier than 2x is a great book. I've been reading that, right? And they talk about 2xing as optimizing your horse and buggy, right? You put in all this effort and there's only so much more you can do, right? It's exhausting, it's soul crushing, right? It's hard work and it's more effort without like massive transformation, right? And so just to go back to my example, for 10 years out of fellowship, I was hustling. I've worked with physicians who are working two jobs, everything to just increase their savings and invest more in the stock market, right? But 10xing is not about working more. It's not about hustling. It's not about quantity. It's about quality that causes the transformations. And so for me, it took me 7 years to get from $1,000 in passive income a month to $2,000, right? 7 years. And then my shift from $2,000 of passive income a month to $10,000 in passive income a month was a 1 year period, right? And it wasn't a 1 year period because it was unique to me. It was because of a 10x strategy we're using, right? Same thing. A portfolio that was $1 million in size to $2 million took me 7 years. And then going from a portfolio of 4 million to partnering to now manage over 400 million was a 2 year journey, right? So another 10x shift. Same thing. Going from a community of 200 to 400 was 1 year, right? So that's still using the 2x strategy. And then shifting strategies and going from 2,000 members to 20,000 members happened in a 2 year period, right? So those are the 10x jumps that we're talking about, right? And so how do you make it happen? I want to get to it. What are the three key elements, the three pillars for anyone who's 10xing? But before that, let's talk about the barriers, right? Because those are real barriers, right? What are the barriers? And then how do you overcome it? And what are the three key elements you need to 10x? Now, I think the biggest barrier is letting go of our comfort zone and our identity, right? I'm a doctor. This is what I do. This is what I know. And that is, foreign to me. I don't want to risk everything, right? So staying within your comfort zone is one of the biggest barriers, right? But the truth is that what got us here, and we've gone through a lot to be where we are today, right? We've achieved so much. We've made 10x jumps to even get to be here. But what gets you here is not what's going to get you to the next level, right? Your next level requires a new you. And letting go of that identity and comfort zone can be very, very hard. Now, the second thing, second biggest barrier, I think, is asking the wrong question. Because most of us are saying, okay, how can I do twice as better, right? And so when we do our goal setting during a 10x event, during goal mapping that I do with our one-on-one coaching students, it's the same thing. And so the question is, okay, what's your 5 year goal? And often we hold ourselves back and we're thinking linear and say, I did that. When I wanted to scale my portfolio, I said, hey, this is what I've done so far. I'm going to take the same thing and just do more of it. And so I was like, oh, in 3 years, I'm going to get here. And then I ended up getting to the point of financial freedom in a year because I wasn't using 2x anymore. After a point, I shifted to 10x, right? And we'll deep dive into how we do that. But the important thing is to know that sometimes asking the wrong question is going to keep you stuck, because when you say, how am I going to do twice as better as last year, then you have many options, right? So if you say, okay, I've done this so far, what do I do now to really accelerate? And if you're really thinking about it in your head, you will find, if I think about that in terms of what we do in GW Capital or Generational Wealth MD, there are so many answers that fit that box, right? There's so many things we could do to get to 2x. But if I say, how do we get 10 times better than what we're doing over here? Then, you narrow it down to just fewer things. There are very few things where you're using leverage to get to 10x. And so 2x, many options, analysis paralysis, right? That's the biggest barrier. But when you go to 10x, you have only a few things that can really help you 10x. And so now you have to do less and you have fewer options, right? So it simplifies things in a sense. And I always say, like always, right? Another big part of the barrier is not knowing your why, your ultimate purpose. Why are you doing this? And that why is really going to be something you lean into as you look to get out of your comfort zone and embrace your new identity, right? And so the ultimate purpose for most of us, right? That's why you're here, that's why you're listening to this, is to expand your time, geographic, financial, legacy, and relationship freedoms, right? So it's not just time freedom, it's geographic freedom, financial freedom, right? Financial freedom gives us all of these things, which is why we're spending our time here. It's your ability to leave a legacy that is beyond what you could have imagined, right? There is no end to the freedoms you can create. What are you going to be able to do for your relationships, right? That is your ultimate purpose. And that is why you're thinking. And a big thing for all of us is giving back. It could be to our family, to our community, right? Empowering others is another big why. And I think sometimes we forget that this is why we are trying to shift to the 10x strategy as opposed to 2x, because that is worth getting out of your comfort zone, right? So those are the barriers. And, when you expand your identity and make those 10x jumps, you can tap into freedoms that you did not even think were possible. Okay. Now that we've done that, right? Now that we've realized how 10x is easier than 2x and what really holds us back, let's talk about what we need to do in terms of action items.
If you're interested in learning how to invest in long-term and short-term rentals the right way, so you can accelerate to financial independence with the support of mentorship, community, and vetted investor agents in strong markets across the country, then get on the waitlist for the next cohort of Creating Generational Freedom at www.generationalwealthmd.com. You don't have to learn from decades of costly mistakes by yourself. The program is only open for enrollment in the spring and fall each year. In the last 6 months alone, our members have acquired over $60 million of real estate, and more importantly, they're living life and practicing medicine on their terms. You don't have to do it alone.
What are the 3 things that people do who have these massive 10x non-linear jumps, right? They're doing something different. So what is it that they're doing? So there are 3 things. The first one is going to be a transformation of identity. Okay. And like I said, that is the core of everything. So when we think about investing, and I used to do this a lot before, I've been coaching for 4 years now. In the beginning, I was like, okay, I need to teach them strategy. But before you can even get to that, the first thing you're doing is really embracing a new identity, right? This is what is possible for others, and this is what I need to embrace because this is what it's going to give me, right? Leaning into your why. So really the first thing is going to be a transformation of your identity. The second thing is going to be strategy or mastery, right? Excuse me. And this is where, you are developing new skills and new capabilities, right? And now to be able to master, to be able to really, lean into those strategies and use them effectively, again, you need to really commit, right? You need to commit where when you commit, you are at the point of no return. And that's what you need to shift your identity, right? Because nothing really happens until you commit. There is a point of no return. I remember this when we were hosting the first Physician Freedom Summit. Guys, we are hosting the third one in person in California at the Langham, a beautiful property, in October. But the first summit, I remember, I'd never done this before, right? Never hosted, honestly, any virtual summits at that point. And I what I did was I committed. I paid, at that time, this was a huge amount for me, right? I paid an online business manager $2,500 and I said, okay, here, take this. We hadn't made any money from the event at that point. I said, take this. And this is what we're committing to. And that was the point of no return, right? And I've had, like, for this summit, we've hired event managers. We're like, okay, an in-person event is a massive undertaking. Why are we doing this, right? Leaning into the why. Because there is massive transformation that happens when you are face-to-face with other people who are your tribe. And we got to the point where we couldn't push this forward, right, to another year. So I committed and I paid the event managers. And this time it was It was about 10 times what I paid my first online business manager, right? And I committed. And that gets to the point of no return, right? So, same thing when you hire someone. And so, for all of you over here, in order to really lean into mastery, you need to commit. And so, for you, if it's committing to the Physician Freedom Summit, join us. It's generationalwealthmd.com/summit in lowercase. Honestly, that is that if you want to master, if you want to make a 10x shift, you need to commit. The next thing is going to be courage, right? And so to master anything, you need to, oftentimes what we do is we're avoiding what we fear, which is getting out of our comfort zone, becoming uncomfortable, taking risk, right? Because we look at risk very differently. When you know what you're doing, you're lowering your risk, you're not increasing risk, right? But we avoid what we fear instead of approaching what we want, which is the freedoms that we want, right? So having the courage to do that. And then a big part of mastery, especially in the realm of 10x jumps, is what is called the Pareto principle. And some of you may have heard of this before, right? But the Pareto principle emphasizes that 80% of what you achieve is because of 20% of the things you do, right? And so when you focus on the 20% of things that are helping you get to your goals and you're eliminating 80% of the things that keep you hustling, that is what gets you to a next 10x jump, right? So people who are thinking 2x, they will continue to do the 80% of things, the hustle that keeps them on that linear trajectory, right? This is where you're optimizing the horse and the buggy, right? There's only so much you can push that horse to go, even if you're optimizing things, right? That's a 2x journey. The 10x journey is taking the 20% of things that give you 80% of results and scaling that and letting go of the 80% that is the hustle, right? This is how you get to nonlinear transformation. This is called inventing the car, right? And this is from the book 10x is easier than 2x, which makes absolute sense. It's like when you're saying, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing more of it to get to where I want to go, that is you optimizing a horse and buggy. When you're saying 10x, you're saying, I'm going to invent the car. This is something completely new. This is a massive transformation. This is quality over quantity, right? So to be able to get to the point of mastery, you need to commit. You need to have courage, and you're using the Pareto principle. You're shedding the 80% that isn't serving you. That's the only way to get to mastery. But there's the third part of this equation is huge. It is huge because honestly, without the third part, you cannot have that transformation of identity and you cannot have mastery. And I say this from experience. And the third part of the puzzle is the third piece of the puzzle is having access to community and having access to relationships that help you 10x. Now, this is mentors. This is, tribes, your tribe. This is who, not how. This could be, investing, your investor agents, your teams, your partners, your capital partners, a real estate savvy CPA, someone who was really, I'm going to take you to that next level. And oftentimes we look at this as a cost, but these are actually investments that we cannot afford to not make, right? And so looking at my journey, all my 10x jumps, I've had mentors, I've leaned into community, and then I've hired people, teams to help me get to that level. Last year, I paid 6 figures to join the Tony Robbins Platinum Partnership. And already, and I'm headed to Fiji next month, but already, I'm forming connections, relationships, and it's giving me access to things I would never have had access to, right? That is a 10x jump. When we started GW Capital Fund 1, I needed to find a tribe of people who were experts in customizable funds, who were discussing those challenges instead of doing it alone. So I joined a community of fund managers so we could learn the challenges and do it right? I've had so many mentors, including Beardy Brandon from Bigger Pockets to Coach Trevor McGregor, who has coached many giants in the space of, apartment syndication. And so that's how I am expanding my identity and also mastering the skills. So it leads me to embrace number 1 and 2, right? Those first 2 pillars. Same thing with hiring, right? Hiring an employee requires commitment because you now have an expense, you have overhead, but it also allows me to lose that 80%. That's what allows me to lose that 80% and focus on the 20% that's going to get me to that 10x level. And this is when we hired our operations manager, huge bump in terms of what we were able to do. Same thing with our event managers. It allows me to focus on the 20%. And so all of this, I have invested in all of this because I know it allows me to 10x and it allows me to have more freedom, more time freedom, more financial freedom, relationship freedom, legacy freedom, right? And so for those of you who haven't signed up for the summit, this is what I am hoping for you, right? So you're committing. I want you to, if you're thinking about one simple action you can take today that's going to help you 10x, that's going to help you surround yourself with people who are going to help you 10x. Like I said, it's about identity, it's about strategy. But the biggest piece is going to be the relationships that are going to take you to that level, right? And so when you commit, right? And so a big part of really getting to the next level is committing. When you commit to the summit, when you get your ticket, and they're actually discounted right now, so do it this week. That's at generationalwealthmd.com/summit in lowercase. When you commit and you put yourself in that room, and there is the difference between virtual summits and in-person summits is massive. I take the time out of my life to go to these summits in person because the connections, even a 5-minute conversation, 5-minute conversations has given me 7 figures in revenue. That is how powerful an in-person event can be. But this is what, having those relationships, that is what's going to help you shift your identity and master what you need to have your 10x jump so you can have the freedoms that you're thinking of, right? So I want you to stop thinking about 2x because 2x is much harder. I want you to think about the more impossible goals. These stories you're hearing, these are physicians who have 10x'd because of their strategy, because of their identity, because of the relationships, the people they surround themselves with. And that is so much more easily attainable. I'm hoping that this is helping you break, shatter some of those myths out there. All you need to do is to have a few strategies outside of your current comfort zone, right? Different from what you're doing right now, to get you to your next 10x jump. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. I think it's a very interesting topic, so keep me posted. Awesome, guys. I will really look forward to listening to what you have to say. And until next week, I'll see you guys then.